Hey there, listener. Ready to dive deep with us again?
Always.
Awesome. Today, we're tackling B.F. Skinner.
The Skinner box guy.
Yeah, but there's so much more to him. He was obsessed with education, had wild ideas about learning.
Uh-huh. Totally shook things up. Even decades later, people are still debating his theories.
Right, like what really makes learning tick. Okay, for this deep dive, we've got some juicy excerpts, right?
Oh, yeah. One of his papers on these teaching machines from back in 1958.
Wow, way before their time.
Then there's a bit from a book he wrote in 84, and another paper that digs deep into programmed instruction.
Sounds intense.
Yeah.
So, are we going to try to figure out if his ideas still hold up today?
That's the plan. And maybe even uncover some surprises along the way.
Ooh, I like surprises. Okay, let's start with this whole problem of motivation thing.
Ah, yes. Skinner really flipped the script on how we usually think about getting kids excited to learn.
Like most people think, how do we motivate kids?
Mm-hmm.
But Skinner's saying,
We've got it all wrong. He said the problem wasn't the kids, it was our teaching methods.
interesting. So traditional teaching, it's all about grades and punishments, right?
Too much stick, not enough carrot. Punishing kids for not studying.
Which, let's be honest, no one enjoys.
Yeah.
Learn this or you fail. Not exactly inspiring.
Right. Makes you want to rebel, almost. Then you've got progressive education swinging the other way.
Oh yeah, follow your passions. Sounds amazing.
In theory. But sometimes it neglects those essential subjects that might not naturally spark a kid's interest.
Yeah, not every kid is going to love grammar no matter how many fun worksheets we give them.
Sadly true. So where does that leave us? Traditional methods are too focused on punishment. Progressive education can be a bit too idealistic. What was Skinner's solution?
Yeah, what was his big idea?
Teaching machines. Imagine students learning at their own pace, getting constant feedback. Motivation becomes a non-issue because learning itself is the reward.
Hold on, these teaching machines, this is back in the 50s, right? Not exactly iPads.
Nope. More like picture a bulky box. You answer multiple choice questions, the machine tells you if you're right or wrong, then you move on.
So like a really, really old school version of online learning.
Pretty much. Individualized but analog. The secret sauce here is what Skinner called programmed instruction. Break down complex topics into small steps, immediate feedback, learn at your own speed.
I'm starting to see the appeal.
Oh, and get this. Skinner and his team, they were super meticulous. Each tiny piece of information, they called it a frame, had to be super concise and focused.
Wow, so they were really thinking about how to design these learning experiences.
Absolutely. And they analyzed thousands of student responses to refine their programs. Data-driven education, way back then.
So they were like the original EdTech nerds, huh?
Mm.
I wonder how much of that data-driven approach is still missing in classrooms today.
That's a great question for our listeners to ponder. Think back to your own education. Was it truly tailored to you?
Good point. Now, when most people think teaching machines, they imagine rote memorization, right? Like
Well-
boring drills.
Yeah, but Skinner's vision went way beyond that. He wanted to use these principles to shape complex skills, stuff that goes beyond just spitting back facts.
Really? Like what?
Well, he and his colleagues were doing research on how to use these principles to help children with autism develop speech.
No way. That's amazing. But how does that even work?
It's all about shaping, breaking a complex skill like speech into tiny, tiny steps. And you reinforce each step along the way.
So you're guiding the learner towards that bigger goal.
Right. And Skinner was also fascinated by how to teach students to make distinctions, or what he called errorless discriminations, learning the right way from the start, without all the mistakes and corrections.
So instead of trial and error, it's more like, get it right the first time? Is that even possible?
That's the beauty of it. You structure the learning environment so well that students are almost naturally led to the right answer. Like, imagine a language app that subtly guides you to the right grammar without ever explicitly pointing out your mistakes.
Oh, I've used apps like that. They could be pretty sneaky, but effective.
Exactly. This idea of shaping behavior through clever design, it applies to all kinds of skills.
Okay, I'm hooked. Give me some more examples.
Well, think about this. How do you keep students motivated even when there's no immediate reward? We all struggle with this, right?
Oh, totally. Those long-term goals.
Mhm.
It's easy to get discouraged when you don't see results right away. Like, I want to be healthy, but that donut looks so good right now.
Exactly. So how do you bridge that gap? Skinner thought understanding what he called contingencies of reinforcement was key.
Okay, now you're just using fancy words. What does that even mean?
Fair enough. Think about it like this. You're teaching a dog to sit, right? The behavior is the sitting, the consequence is the treat, and the situation is you saying sit.
Ah, okay. So it's not just about drilling information over and over. You're creating the right conditions for that behavior to happen.
Exactly. It's all about understanding that specific reinforcement at the right time in the right context. That's what really shapes behavior.
Makes sense. Like if I want to learn a new language, repeating flashcards isn't as effective as actually having a conversation and getting feedback, right?
Yeah, you got it. So the real challenge is to figure out those specific contingencies, the magic formula for behavior, consequence, and situation that unlocks real, lasting learning. And get this, Skinner believed you could apply this to way more than just facts.
So not just memorizing dates and formulas.
Nope. He thought you could teach things like a sense of rhythm in music, typing, even sports.
Wait, you can teach someone to have rhythm.
That's what he thought. He believed even something that feels as innate as rhythm could be broken down into smaller behaviors and taught through carefully designed instruction.
That's wild. So what other complex skills did he think could be taught this way?
He talked about three-dimensional thinking skills, the kind that are essential for scientists, doctors, architects.
No, so like being able to visualize and manipulate things in your mind.
Yep. Imagine if you could break that down into teachable steps. It would be a game changer, especially for students who struggle with spatial reasoning.
Mind-blowing. Okay, listener, we got to ask, what are your biggest learning struggles? What subjects just seem impossible no matter how hard you try?
Yeah, take a minute to think about it. Do any of Skinner's ideas resonate with your own experiences?
Okay, now for the really mind-bending part. Skinner actually thought things like thinking, problem solving, even creativity, stuff we usually see as these magical internal processes. He thought you could break those down into behaviors and teach them too.
I know, right? It sounds crazy, but his argument was that if we can figure out the environmental factors that influence those mental activities, we can shape them more deliberately.
Wait, so you're saying our thoughts, even creative ideas, aren't just random. They're influenced by what we've learned in our environment.
That's what he believed. He gave examples like how teachers can manipulate the classroom to improve students' attention. It's not just telling a kid to focus, it's about understanding what the teacher can do to make focusing more likely.
Ah, so instead of blaming a kid for being distractible, you change what's causing the distraction.
Exactly. He also said good study habits are like a form of self-programming. If we understand what successful learners do naturally, we can teach those strategies to others.
So it's like hacking the learning process.
I like that analogy.
Yeah.
And for problem solving, he suggested guiding students through increasingly difficult problems or demonstrating specific methods.
Ah, so giving them a mental toolbox instead of just saying, figure it out.
You got it. And all of this connects to this really interesting idea Skinner got from the philosopher Francis Bacon, the idea of idols.
Idols, like little statues?
Not quite. They're biases and false notions that cloud our judgment. Skinner applied this to education, saying many of our beliefs about learning actually prevent us from being effective teachers.
That's deep. So what kind of idols did he have in mind? Give us the dirt.
Well, one big one he called the formalistic fallacy. It's this idea that simply presenting information is the same as teaching.
Oh yeah, the if you build it, they will come approach to education. Doesn't quite work that way.
Oh, just because you've stood at the front of the room and talked doesn't mean students have actually learned anything.
So what's the solution? How do we get past this formalistic fallacy?
That's where all those ideas we've been talking about come in understanding contingencies of reinforcement, breaking down complex skills, giving immediate feedback, personalizing the learning experience. It's about actively engaging students, not just passively presenting information.
Makes sense. What other idols did Skinner call out?
Well, another one was this over-reliance on natural consequences. He said often the natural consequence of not learning something is too far off or too inconsistent to really teach anything.
Yeah, like if I don't study for a test, the consequence is maybe failing.
Yeah.
But that's weeks away. Not exactly motivating me to hit the books right now.
Exactly. That's why we need to be more deliberate. We need to design learning experiences that give clear, immediate feedback. Tighten that connection between actions and consequences.
So immediate feedback is key. Got it. Any other idols lurking out there?
One more big one is the overemphasis on ultimate goals. Yeah, long-term goals are important, but they're not enough to keep you going every single day.
It's like, I want to be a doctor.
Great goal, but it's not going to get you through all those late night study sessions. You need those smaller, more immediate wins to keep you going.
Absolutely. You need that satisfaction of mastering a concept, getting positive feedback, even just the joy of learning something new. Those are the things that keep you motivated day after day. And this is where we start to see the ethical implications of Skinner's work. If we get really good at understanding and manipulating those contingencies of reinforcement, well, we have the power to shape behavior in some pretty powerful ways.
Yeah, that is kind of a scary thought. Like, if we could control the conditions for learning so precisely, are we messing with people's free will? That's exactly the kind of question Skinner's work forces us to grapple with, and it's something we'll be exploring more deeply in the next part of our deep dive.
Ooh, cliffhanger. Can't wait to hear what you have to say about that. But for now, listener, we'd love to hear your thoughts. What stood out to you so far?
What's resonating with your own experiences as a learner, and what implications do you think these ideas might have for the future of education? We'll be back soon to continue our deep dive into the fascinating and sometimes controversial world of B.F. Skinner. All right, welcome back. Last time, things were getting pretty intense, right?
Yeah, we were starting to dive into some of those big, maybe even a little uncomfortable questions about control and free will.
Mm-hmm.
The kind that Skinner's work tends to provoke.
Right, like if we could engineer the perfect learning environment, shape behavior so precisely, would we even want to?
Exactly. It's like, where's the line between effective teaching and, I don't know, brainwashing?
Skinner himself knew this would make people uneasy. Having that much influence over how people learn and behave, it raises all sorts of questions about control and autonomy.
Yeah, on the one hand, we want our kids to learn and succeed. But on the other hand, we don't want to feel like we're turning them into robots. So where do you draw the line?
Tough question. And honestly, it's one we're still struggling with today, especially with all the new technologies that can influence behavior in increasingly sophisticated ways. Think about personalized learning platforms, educational games, social media algorithms.
Whoa, you're right. All designed to grab our attention, keep us hooked.
And often they're using the same principles of reinforcement that Skinner studied.
Mind-blowing. It's not just about whether these technologies work, but what happens to our sense of free will if they work too well.
Exactly. And remember, Skinner was a determinist. He believed that all behavior, even our thoughts and feelings, are ultimately a product of our genes and our environment.
So no free will, we're just puppets on a string.
Well, it's a bit more nuanced than that. He wasn't saying we're totally mindless robots, but he did believe that our choices are always shaped by factors that we might not even be aware of.
Okay, I can see how that might freak some people out. But I'm also wondering, if we accept that idea, what does it say about responsibility? Like, if our choices are already determined, can we really be held accountable for our actions?
Now you're getting into some deep philosophical territory. And Skinner didn't shy away from that. He said even if we accept determinism, it doesn't mean we throw out concepts like responsibility and morality.
So it's not a get-out-of-jail-free card just because my genes made me do it.
Nope. He thought it meant we need to be more thoughtful about how we define and apply those concepts.
So like about blame, more about understanding why people do what they do,
Mm.
and then creating environments that encourage positive choices.
Right on. And it's crucial to remember, Skinner wasn't advocating for some dystopian society where the government controls everyone's behavior. He was genuinely interested in using these principles to empower individuals, create a more humane and just society.
Okay, that makes sense. So it's not about control for control's sake. It's about using these insights to help people thrive.
Exactly. Which brings us to another big question that always comes up with Skinner. What about creativity? If we're so focused on shaping behavior, does that squash originality and independent thought?
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. If you're constantly reinforcing specific behaviors, do you just end up with a bunch of conformists who can't think outside the box?
It's a common concern, but Skinner actually thought the opposite. He argued that effective teaching doesn't stifle creativity, it enhances it.
Wait, really? How so?
He said to be truly creative, you need a strong foundation of knowledge and skills. You can't paint a masterpiece without knowing how to mix colors, right? You can't write a symphony if you don't understand musical theory.
It's like trying to build a house with no tools or materials.
Exactly. And he also said we can actually teach people to be more creative, teach them problem-solving strategy, encourage them to explore new environments, give them the freedom to experiment.
So it's not about limiting their options. It's about giving them the tools to create their own options.
Precisely. And he had this interesting idea about the role of quantity in fostering originality. He said sheer quantity of behavior increases the chances of creating something truly new.
So a musician who writes 100 songs is more likely to create a hit than a musician who only writes 10.
That's the idea. It's about increasing the odds of stumbling onto something truly unique and innovative. And he argued that cultures that encourage experimentation and exploration are more likely to produce creative individuals.
So Skinner's vision of education wasn't about creating rows of obedient robots. It was about understanding the principles of learning so we could empower individuals to reach their full potential.
You got it. And it's a vision that, while maybe a little unsettling to some, really forces us to rethink what it means to learn and how we can create educational environments that nurture both creativity and self-reliance.
Makes you think, right? What do you think, listener? What's been the most thought-provoking idea so far?
What's resonating with your own experiences as a learner, and what implications do you think these ideas might have for the future of education?
Okay, let's shift gears for a bit and circle back to those idols of the school we mentioned earlier. Remember, Skinner's basically saying that a lot of our traditional beliefs about education are actually holding us back.
Roadblocks to progress, preventing us from adopting more effective and, frankly, more humane teaching methods.
One of the big ones was that formalistic fallacy we talked about, the idea that just presenting information equals teaching.
And another one was that over-reliance on natural consequences. Often, the natural consequence of not learning something is just too delayed or too inconsistent to be a good teacher.
Like we said, the consequences of not studying might not hit you until weeks later. Not exactly motivating in the moment.
Right. We need to design learning experiences with clear, immediate feedback. Make that connection between action and consequence much tighter.
Immediate feedback, got it. Any other idols we need to watch out for?
He also criticized putting too much emphasis on those ultimate goals. Yes, they're important, but they're not enough to sustain motivation on a daily basis.
I want to be an astronaut. That's great, but it's not going to get you through all the math homework.
You need those smaller wins along the way, the satisfaction of mastering a skill, positive feedback from a teacher, even just the joy of discovering something new. Those are the things that fuel us day to day.
Celebrate those small wins. They add up. Now, Skinner was also pretty skeptical of those mentalistic terms we often use to explain behavior. Words like understanding, insight, motivation.
He thought they were often used in a vague, unhelpful way. Didn't really explain what was happening. He wanted to focus on observable behavior and the environmental factors that shape it.
So instead of asking, why is this student unmotivated? You would ask, what's in their environment that's making them less likely to engage?
You got it. Shift the focus from those internal states we can't see or measure to things we can actually change in the environment. And this brings us back to those ethical questions. If we get really good at manipulating those environmental factors, well, we have a lot of power.
And that raises the question, how much control is too much control, even if we have good intentions?
Exactly. We don't want a world where everyone's just blindly responding to rewards and punishments. We want people to think for themselves, make their own choices, pursue their own goals.
So it's a balancing act, understanding how learning works, but also recognizing the responsibility that comes with that knowledge.
Absolutely. It's about empowering people, not controlling them. That's the key.
Well said. Now, Skinner was especially critical of using punishment in education, like old school discipline, that kind of thing.
Yeah, he argued it was often ineffective and could even be harmful.
In what way?
Well, he said it can create a lot of fear and anxiety, make it harder for students to learn, damage their relationship with teachers, make them resentful and disengaged.
Makes sense. No one learns well when they're constantly afraid of getting in trouble.
Right. And maybe most importantly, punishment doesn't teach kids what to do, it just teaches them what not to do.
That's a good point. Like, if you punish a kid for talking out of turn, you're not teaching them how to participate in a discussion properly.
Exactly. And it can backfire in other ways, too. If you keep punishing a student for making mistakes, they might avoid challenges altogether, become afraid to take risks. And that's a killer for learning and creativity.
So if punishment's not the answer, what is? What did Skinner think was a better approach?
Positive reinforcement. Reward the behaviors you want to see instead of punishing the ones you don't.
Catch them being good. I like that. But how do you do it effectively?
Skinner said reinforcement has to be immediate and connected to the desired behavior. So if you want a student to raise their hand before speaking, you praise them right when they do it.
And be specific, right? Not just good job. But I love how you raise your hand before speaking. That shows respect for your classmates.
Exactly. The more consistent you are with that, the more likely those behaviors are to stick. And Skinner's ideas about reinforcement, they've been used everywhere. Classrooms, workplaces, homes, even animal training. They can be super effective for shaping all sorts of behaviors.
I bet some people are thinking, isn't that just bribery?
It's true, reinforcement can be misused. But when it's done right, it's not about manipulation. It's about creating a win-win situation, encouraging positive behaviors in a way that benefits everyone.
Gotcha. It's about setting up the right conditions for success. And remember, reinforcement doesn't always have to be something tangible like candy or a sticker. Sometimes a smile, a word of encouragement, or even just the satisfaction of mastering a skill can be just as powerful.
Couldn't agree more. Now, Skinner also had some fascinating ideas about teaching complex skills, the stuff that goes way beyond memorizing facts or following simple instructions.
Yeah, how do you teach those bigger, more complicated things?
He believed any complex skill could be broken down into smaller, more manageable steps, a process he called shaping.
Shaping, I like that. It's like you're gradually molding and refining behavior over time.
It's a perfect analogy. Imagine a kid learning to ride a bike. You wouldn't just plop them on a two-wheeler and say, go.
Oh, no way. That's a recipe for scraped knees and a meltdown.
Right. You'd probably start with training wheels, then slowly introduce more challenging steps as they gain confidence.
And you'd be there cheering them on every step of the way,
Yeah.
celebrating those small victories.
Exactly. Break it down into manageable chunks, reinforce those successes along the way.
So shaping can apply to all sorts of things, from reading and writing to playing sports and music. Anything that seems daunting at first can be broken down into smaller, more achievable steps.
You got it. And shaping also ties into another key concept, discrimination training.
Okay, now I'm curious, what's that all about?
It's about teaching students to differentiate between different things, understanding what behaviors are appropriate in different situations.
So like knowing when it's okay to shout and when it's not, or knowing the difference between a B and a D.
Exactly. Think about a child learning to read. They need to tell the difference between different letters and sounds. Or a kid learning a musical instrument. They have to distinguish between different notes and rhythms.
It's like developing that finely tuned awareness of the subtle differences between things.
Precisely. And Skinner thought discrimination training was crucial for learning because it helps students apply their skills in new situations.
So if I learn to recognize the letter A in one font, I can recognize it in a different font too.
Exactly. He believed you could teach this kind of discrimination effectively using, you guessed it, reinforcement.
So you might reward a child for correctly identifying different letters or sounds, or for playing the right notes on an instrument.
Right, and you can gradually increase the difficulty of the tasks to help them refine their skills.
Like a mental workout.
It is. Now, all of this connects to another big idea, personalized learning.
Oh yeah, I've heard a lot about that lately. What was Skinner's take on personalized learning?
He was a huge fan. He said students learn at different paces in different ways, and those traditional classrooms, with their one-size-fits-all approach, often miss the mark.
So instead of trying to squeeze everyone into the same mold, we should create learning experiences that are tailored to each student's strengths and challenges.
You got it. He was all about teaching machines and individualized instruction. Let students learn at their own speed, in their own way.
And he thought this could be especially helpful for students who are struggling in traditional classrooms, right?
Absolutely. And you know what's really cool? Skinner's ideas about personalized learning are more relevant than ever in our world of educational technology.
Wow, I can imagine. We have so many tools now that can help us tailor learning experiences in ways that Skinner could only dream of.
Think about adaptive learning software, online tutoring, virtual reality simulations. All these technologies can make learning more engaging, effective, and personalized.
It's like we can finally create those individualized learning environments that Skinner envisioned, but with the help of 21st century tech.
Exactly. It's an exciting time to be in education, but as with any technology, we got to use these tools wisely, make sure they align with our values.
So it's not just about the tech itself, it's about how we use it to create truly meaningful learning experiences.
Well said. Now, another important piece of Skinner's work that's had a huge impact is his concept of programmed instruction.
Remind me, what's that all about again?
It's a teaching method that breaks down complex material into small sequential steps and gives students instant feedback on their progress.
So kind of like those teaching machines, but maybe a bit more advanced.
You could say that. Skinner thought programmed instruction could be incredibly effective, especially for students who are struggling in those traditional classrooms.
So it's about creating a more structured, supportive environment where students can move at their own pace and get the feedback they need.
Exactly. And while there are different types of programmed instruction, they all share that goal of individualization and self-paced learning.
And they're all based on those principles of reinforcement we've been talking about.
You know it. And while some folks have criticized programmed instruction for being too rigid or lacking creativity, it's still a valuable tool for educators who want to personalize learning and give students that instant feedback.
It's all about finding the right tool for the job, right?
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
And I think it's also important to talk about what Skinner had to say about the role of the teacher in all of this. He had some pretty strong opinions about what good teaching looks like.
I'm all ears. What did he think teachers should be doing?
He believed their main job was to create an environment that's conducive to learning, and that meant focusing on reinforcing those desired behaviors, not punishing the bad ones.
So less sage on the stage, more guide on the side.
That's a great way to put it. He thought teachers should be skilled in using things like programmed instruction, individualized teaching methods, let students learn at their own pace.
But he also recognized that teachers are more than just reinforcement dispensers, right?
Oh, absolutely. He believed great teachers were passionate about their subject and could inspire students to learn. He saw the ideal teacher as someone who was both a skilled technician and a passionate advocate for learning.
So it's not about replacing teachers with robots. It's about giving teachers the tools and knowledge they need to be even more effective.
Exactly. And while some folks have criticized Skinner's view for being too focused on behaviorism, not paying enough attention to the cognitive and emotional side of things, his ideas still force us to think differently about what it means to be a good teacher.
It's that balance between the science of learning and the art of teaching.
Right. Well said. Now, it's important to acknowledge that not everyone agrees with Skinner. He was a controversial figure. His work sparked a lot of debate.
Yeah, some of his ideas can definitely be a little hard to swallow. But I think even if you don't agree with everything he said, there's still a lot we can learn from him.
Oh, absolutely. Skinner was a true pioneer. His work has profoundly changed how we think about learning, motivation, even human potential.
Even if we don't fully buy into his vision of a technology of teaching, we can still appreciate those insights he gave us into how learning really works.
I agree. And it's worth remembering, his work wasn't just about manipulating behavior, it was about understanding it. He believed that by understanding those principles of learning, we could empower people to make better choices and create a better world.
That's a goal we can all get behind, right?
For sure. Now, before we wrap up our deep dive into B.F. Skinner, there's one last very provocative idea I think we need to touch on. So remember how I said Skinner had this one really provocative idea?
Oh, yeah, the one that was going to make us all squirm in our seats. Lay it on me.
All right, well, he argued that a truly effective technology of teaching, one that could really shape behavior, get those desired results, it might actually make us uncomfortable.
Why? Isn't that what we all want? Effective teaching, students learning, and succeeding.
It is, but Skinner's point was, if we could control those conditions for learning so precisely, it challenges a lot of what we believe about education, about freedom, even about what it means to be human.
Okay, I'm starting to see where you're going with this. Like, if we could guarantee that every student would master certain skills or learn certain things, would we even want to?
Yeah. Think about it. Would we still value that struggle of learning if we could just eliminate it?
Interesting point.
And what happens to our ideas about individual potential, personal choice, even what it means to be a good student?
Like, are we aiming for conformity?
Yeah.
Or are we aiming for growth and
Some
adaptability?
big questions, right?
Huge.
And I don't think Skinner thought he had all the answers, but he wanted us to confront those assumptions we have about how people learn and what we're really trying to achieve with education.
He's definitely a pioneer.
Yeah.
Not afraid to push the boundaries, make people think.
Love him or hate him, you can't deny his impact. The way we think about learning, motivation, even human potential, it's all been influenced by his work.
So, listener, what's the takeaway for you? Maybe it's that we need to pay closer attention to how we're already shaping behavior, not just in classrooms, but everywhere.
Or maybe it's a call to examine those beliefs we have about education. Are we clinging to outdated ideas that are actually preventing progress? Are we putting too much emphasis on standardization, not enough on individual growth?
Skinner's work definitely leaves us with a lot to chew on. Who knows, maybe some of you listening will be inspired to dig up those old teaching machines and see what they can teach us today.
I love that idea.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. It's been a wild ride exploring the world of B.F. Skinner.
Until next time, keep diving deep, keep asking those tough questions, and keep learning.
We'll see you on the next deep dive.